Hello and welcome to Working Stiff Radio. I'm Envy, my pronouns are they, them, and this is my co-host.
I'm AJ, my pronouns are they or she.
Hello, welcome to episode 1.
Yeah, this is one small step and all that. It's a bit of a momentous occasion.
One small step for who?
No one. No. There was a lot of small steps for me.
True. But, okay, but if
that theme song was a pain in the ass, okay?
Yeah, no, that's fair. But it's okay, so it's a lot of small steps for you. Who is it a huge leap for?
The podcasting community. You're welcome.
The podcasting community. We have arrived, finally.
Yeah. We're not what you've been waiting for. Is this a good first impression?
Who could say, honestly? Who could say? We are a pro wrestling and labor podcast, and we are going to talk some about both those things. We're going to start off by just talking about stuff that has us excited, stuff that's been going on these last few weeks in the world of pro wrestling, in the world of labor, and where the two intersect. And then the main portion of the show today is going to be a interview that me and AJ did with labor organizer Nino, who is working right now a lot with the indie wrestling space. A fantastic conversation that I hope you all enjoy very much. In the meantime, AEW is doing fucking really good right now. I've had a good time watching AEW.
Yeah, I mean, it's fully the AEW experience, with distilled, heightened to its max.
Oh yeah.
Big names you never thought would be there are there, as well as, relatively smaller names you never thought would be there, who you're so excited to see get there. But at the same time, there's also a bunch of names where it's like, I wish you just weren't on my screen, actually.
I really wish you weren't around at all.
Yeah.
At all.
And even with, more time and better matches and things like that with the women's division, more chances that have been given to people, there's still such a long way from any sort of parity between the gender divisions, especially not wild. When they treat it like it's the smallest of the 3 divisions in the company, because one of those divisions is the tag division and it's all men, and there isn't really a women's tag division. There are sometimes tag matches in the women's division, but they don't really have a tag division, even though they've teased that they were gonna do that sometimes.
They have started doing that. Some of the women's tags have matching outfit, matching gear, and I know the music guy has talked about that he's working for tag themes for Anna Jay and Ty Conti, for example.
Their new theme just dropped. I don't know if you heard it.
No, I didn't.
It starts with a big video game fighting game voice that's Ty J, fight.
Oh my god. That's pretty good. Actually, I kind of like that.
And then it goes into samba, but with sort of ska keys of the Dark Order theme.
I mean, if you're gonna have those two together, then that's the way you do it, right?
Yeah, it's cool. It works, I think.
Yeah. So presumably they're going to be doing something, and obviously Penelope Ford and the Bunny.
They've been forming new tag teams that definitely seems as if they're building towards that new division. But at the same time, they have just announced a new women's belt, which is
a singles belt.
And it's almost definitely ending up on Jade, just because it seems designed for her. And you know what?
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with that.
No, not at all.
But it really does seem like Tony Khan cares about 2 women. You know what I mean?
I think Tony Khan cares about 1 woman, and then there's enough pressure for him to care about 1 more woman.
I mean, no, I think it's also just Jade has been given the star treatment from the beginning, so it's like you sort of have to be consistent with that as well. So like if someone's going to get the new belt, it makes a lot of sense that it's her. But also if she gets her first loss in this tournament final, like that would also be a story moment as well. Like, you know,
who would you give that win to?
It would be Thunder Rosa.
Yeah,
I mean, they've already. Sure. Did you see the full gear card leak thing?
No.
Fucking apart, Tony Khan at a Jags game had his notebook visible and was photographed, and it had like a card that he was like planning out, and people were saying like, oh, it looks like it's the full gear card, and literally the only women's matches on it was Britt versus blank, and then Thunder Rosa versus Jade, all caps, short.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh my god. Alright, well, hopefully that doesn't come to pass. Fuck.
So the fact that it's short makes me think Jade's winning it. But
yeah. I mean, that's been all of Jade's matches so far.
Yeah.
Like, I think the longest match she's had is like around the 5-minute mark, something like that.
She's had some tag matches in which, like, you know, true. It's got to stretch out a bit more. But, like, you know, I think she's doing well. She's still impressing me every time. Like,
God, yes. I'm not saying that as a knock on Jade. Like, Jade is fucking great. Love her.
No, only complaints about the women's division, it's almost entirely about the booking. It's rarely ever 100%. Actually about the athletes themselves.
The only one of the athletes I'd knock is Serena Deeb.
There's more. Yeah, there's other people with. Yeah, so
all right. Well,
here's the thing.
That's the one I know
this is Envy. This show is going in front of a new audience. If we're gonna talk shit about people, we need to explain why we have a problem with them. So
that's fair. But
I don't know if we want to get into that right now. I just mean going forward. That's probably something we should think about.
We will do we're gonna talk a lot about AEW because AJ and I both watched it. We will be doing a episode running down things like their factions, their title holders. Like we will be talking about for sure.
Okay,
because I want to do it. That sounds like fun.
Okay.
And also just to have I like doing primers for things. You know, I would love to do an AEW primer for someone who has never seen the promotion before. You know, stuff like that.
That sounds good. We can do that.
Yeah, that sounds like a good time. And then you get fucking every now and then you see something happen that just has you salivating. And that was very much when they announced that fucking Bryan Danielson would be taking on Minoru Suzuki on YouTube of all fucking places.
Yeah. Okay. So so I don't know if we should set this up or if we should just go into how excited we are about this match.
Bryan Danielson, one of the best wrestlers of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely one of the best American wrestlers of all time.
Yes.
Canadian, sorry.
North American.
He's from Canada, right? North American.
I don't know. I don't know if he's Canadian.
I'm pretty sure he's Canadian. Anyway.
But he's the American Dragon?
He's because he worked in anyway. Okay. He's fucking incredible. And has been for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
Minoru Suzuki, likewise, one of the greatest of all time, has somewhere around 2,000 plus matches under his belt, has been working for 30 plus years, something like that.
Combat sports legend.
Absolutely fucking, just living legend status, right? Never thought they would meet. Or they have once before, but now that both of them are very much legend status.
Yeah,
never thought we would see them in the same ring.
Their last match was in 2004.
Yeah. And they fucking delivered. That was an incredible match that they had. I've been seeing some Suzuki matches recently where it looks like he's kind of lost a step a little bit, which is understandable. He's, getting up there in age. And then this match comes along where it doesn't look like he's lost a single step ever. He looks fucking incredible because of the style of match they're both wrestling. It looks so fucking good.
Yeah, it's honestly I've said it before. I'll say it again. Describing this, it's exactly what you would want from the two of them. This is the match that these two were were always going to have, like, or the match wouldn't have happened.
Yeah,
Like
100%.
this is why these two wanted to get into a ring together. This is the ability to have this kind of match is why Bryan Danielson is Bryan Danielson again.
Yeah,
like
100%.
That's why he left WWE and came like, I nearly said return to the Indies, but that's not what's happened. That's not what's happened. He's jumped ship to AEW with, like, you know, a view to work elsewhere as well. It was so he could work these style of matches. Like, he loves, like, the hard body, strong style, you know. He just,
and you can see it. You can see it in this match how much fun he's having. Like, you can see how he's living through it. Yeah.
That it always helps that, like, you know, there is so a lot of people. There were some people who just weren't feeling this match because, you know, because a lot of, you know, it's kind of divisive because whereas we eat this up, me and you know, there are a lot of people who are just like, oh, I'm not really interested in a match that's half elbow chop exchange, you know, but. This to me, that's really underselling and underappreciating what the performance is, because
100%.
These two are, like, such masters of what they do, and, like, not just in being able to kick the shit out of each other, even though that's what they do in this match. It's also in, like, the facial expressions and the story they're able to tell, and, like,
the way they're goading each other, the way they're, like, the amount of times they zoom in on Danielson's face, and he's just like, he looks like he's climbing the tallest mountain he's ever climbed in his life, and, like, he's really trying to push through it, and it looks incredible.
And all of that is, like, communicated, while at the same time, like you initially said, you can tell he's having the time of his life. Like, it comes through in the performance, but, like, the performance itself is, like, something else entirely.
Yeah, it's so good. Like, you can get in, like, even if you don't have access to a TV channel where you can get AEW, if you live, you know, elsewhere, if you even if you haven't seen AEW up until this point, like, just go to AEW's YouTube channel and check out this match. Like, you can just go there. It's free. It's right there. Just watch it, because fucking hell, it's good. What else is going on in wrestling we're watching right now?
See, I've mostly been, I haven't been watching a lot of wrestling recently because I've been training myself, so I've just not been sitting down a lot. But I think so, mostly AEW, but with like you know, a little bit of Noah and some indie stuff, depending on what I'm catching up with at the time. So yeah, I think we could probably talk about AEW a little bit more. I think.
I mean, Hangman's back. That's fun. Yes, he had a great promo. I love him. I love him so much. I'm so excited for him to
come back as the Joker and to win again as the Joker.
100%.
It was so good for him to do that cowboy shit promo where
it was such a good promo.
Yep. And honestly, apparently I needed it because I'd forgot that he'd already won the title shot and put it on the line and lost. Like, even though that was a big moment, it's like, oh well, it's been a few months. I forgot. Like, and
it was so good.
And you know, it's the classic, like, sort of meta promo thing that he kind of excels at, where it's like fully in character, but then is also like, you know, being like, it's like, but it's about him as a wrestler as well as him as a character and him as a person. Like, there is like a sort of unspoken acknowledgement of like the different aspects and how they're all the same in the promo. Like, you know, he talks about how like he went through all that shit that was storyline, Oh, but then I had to go home and look after my beautiful newborn child. And that's why I haven't been here. It's not because I've been depressed for storyline reasons. It's because I had a kid, and that's more important to me than this. But now I'm back.
And the way he said that too, like, and while being on the hottest run of my career, taking a break and going home to be there for the birth of my beautiful baby boy. By God, that's cowboy shit.
Yeah, that was like the most conviction in the entire promo, full of conviction.
100%.
Like
it was so good.
It, that's the thing, is like, you see, it's such perfect. It was such a perfect wrestler promo that it's like he's using like that real love he has that you can see, and like that blends with like the passion of like the rest of the promo, even though it's like completely different. Like it's like one of those things where it's like, okay, no one's saying this is a shoot. It's clearly not a shoot. This is clearly something he has planned out to say.
Yeah,
but it's half got those vibes of like, this is just me talking to you as a performer, not as the cowboy.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, a lot, like, it's a very common thing to say that like the best wrestling character is just you yourself turned up a bit, and Hangman feels like a perfect embodiment of that. I
mean, yeah, that's what he's been doing for like, the entirety of AEW and a bit even previous,
that, yeah.
Whereas like his whole character is that he's insecure and anxious, and his whole story in AEW has been about like the lows that's taken him to and him climbing out of it, and it looks like we're finally gonna get there. Like,
I'm so excited if he beats, like, even though that feels like the perfect, like from a storytelling perspective, it feels like a foregone conclusion that he's going to take it finally. I'm still going to lose my fucking mind if it happens.
Yeah, well, I think the fact that they already did the fake on it of like he won the title opportunity, but then he got screwed out of it before he could have the title match. Like the fact that they've already done that is like one of those things where it's like, well, as a storyteller, that reassures me that like that's probably not going to happen again. But like, as
now
a wrestling fan who's nervous about how things get booked, then it's kind of just planted more seeds of anxiety. But the way AEW books things so far, all indications are that will pay off, and that anxiety will be relieved. But in the meantime, oh my God, what if no? What if Hangman doesn't beat Kenny, actually?
Oh my God, I would... Oh God, I'm not even going to wish. I'm not even going to think about that possibility. I'm so scared. I'm so scared, AD. I'm so scared.
And based on the timing of things, Hangman's first challenger is going to be the winner of the upcoming... title eliminator tournament.
Yeah, I love a tournament.
I do love a tournament. AEW also loves a tournament.
They sure fucking do. I mean, they just released the brackets, right? Like we have Dark Order's 10 versus Moxley, Orange Cassidy versus Powerhouse Hobbs, who I know we said Bison Smith had the best name of wrestlers ever had before, but Powerhouse Hobbs is fucking up there as well.
It's up there, yeah.
We have Dustin Rhodes versus Bryan Danielson, and we have Lance Archer versus Eddie Kingston. That's your brackets. And
yeah, see, here's the thing, like, we know how most of this is gonna go, but the possibilities are so interesting.
There are two question marks for me. Like, Moxley beats 10, no question.
Yes.
Danielson beats Dustin, no question.
Yes.
Cassidy and Hobbs, I could see either way.
I know, but I think Cassidy.
It's Hobbs.
No, it's Cassidy because of
really.
I think. Have you been watching? Because of this, but it's definitely Cassidy. I can tell you why right now.
Please do.
Because they just had Jon Moxley versus Yuta on Dynamite, where Yuta came out with Cassidy, and Yuta just got absolutely fucking squashed in a way he hasn't on AEW before by Mox, and then Cassidy just sort of like stood over him and like watched Mox leave, and it's like, that only happened to set up them, And also,
That's
we've
fair.
seen those two fighting in the ladder match recently.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Still, either way, either of those feel like they could potentially win the match, right? Like Cassidy and Powerhouse Hobbs.
Oh yeah,
both feel like name-wise.
If it wasn't for booking reasons, yes. I would say like, oh yeah, just as a matchup, this could go either way. But because of booking, it's Cassidy. It's Orange.
Yeah. And okay, so if we say Moxley versus Orange, then Moxley probably takes that.
I think because I think Eva would be fun in the final, but I think it's probably Moxley though.
Yeah. Danielson goes over Dustin, no question.
Yeah, no question.
Archer and Kingston is a tough call for me because I really like. I want Eddie to win so badly. I want Eddie to win so badly. I was going to say I would also super like to see Archer win because I really like him as well, but.
You want Eddie too much.
I want Eddie too much. I love Eddie. Eddie Kingston might be my favorite wrestler of all time. Like,
just
flat
he's
out
up
at
there.
This point.
Like, he really is up there. Eddie, I want Eddie to win. I'm not convinced that Archer won't win because of like the New Japan Suzuki Gun connection, and just the fact that Archer is like a big guy, and like if Danielson is going to be the one who wins the tournament, then like. Him going through Archer is like maybe more of an impressive lead up to a hotshot title.
Probably.
You know? But
I would rather see Danielson versus Kingston.
Me too. That's as far as I know, that's a never before done singles match.
Yeah, I don't think it is. Yeah, I don't think that's ever happened before.
I would love to get to see that match.
Yeah, so much.
Either way, though, I'm pretty confident that Danielson will be going to the finals.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I also think he would probably win it.
Yeah,
but
I agree.
I think Moxley,
Moxley has a very good shot.
Moxley has a good shot, but also I think it would make more sense for Danielson to win it and be Hangman's first challenger and take a loss to Hangman.
I think so too.
Moxley. Because
that would really cement Hangman as like the first person that Danielson takes in. Danielson? Hello?
At least you avoided calling him Daniel Bryan on commentary. CM Punk.
If Hangman is the first person that Danielson takes an L to, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like Moxley is up there as well. Like, he would also be a very good person to take Danielson's first L.
Yeah, that's the thing, is like either of them would do it, but I think just for the purposes of like momentum, it makes more sense for Danielson to win the tournament. And
I think so too.
Yeah.
Either way, I'm really excited about all of these matches. Like even Danielson Dustin, I'm honestly excited to see. Like, that is a weird fucking matchup that feels like it could probably be fun in some way.
Yeah. I'm sure Dustin did an angle on Dark Elevation where he's got a new finisher. Like,
yeah.
It's like he called it the Backland driver because it's like a double chicken wing into a power slam. He called it the Backland driver.
Okay, interesting. That's
it wasn't. It didn't look that good, to be honest.
Yeah, that doesn't feel like it would. But all right, I guess. Sure. You do you, Dustin.
It does. It probably doesn't look how you would expect based on that description.
All right. Well, maybe I should watch Elevation then. There was only 4 matches on it this week, so
okay. It's less than half an hour.
Honestly, the only times I end up watching Dark or Elevation is when
it's a short episode.
No, not even that. It's when I hear that there's like, either I hear chatter about like, oh, this specific match really, really was good, or there is like a Lee Moriarty match.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of Lee Moriarty, he was also on the same pre-show as Danielson Suzuki against fucking Bobby Fish.
Yes. Yeah.
Newly signed QAnon favorite, Bobby Fish.
Good wrestler, like can have really good matches.
The match was good. I just can't be excited for Bobby Fish, no matter 100%. How much I'm excited for Lee Moriarty.
Yeah,
I enjoyed watching the match purely because like the crowd started to get on Lee's side like more than Bobby's, which was pleasantly surprising considering what AEW crowds can be like sometimes. Like there's a thin line between the AEW crowd and the Full Sail crowd. You even got the Everton kick guy now.
Yeah. God, we'll talk about the Full Sail crowd in case people aren't familiar at some point. It's a whole fucking thing. You can speak on that more than me. Sure. They're bad. It's just a bad scene. But like, I want the world for Lee Moriarty. Absolutely. I want the world for him. I knew it wasn't gonna happen, but I wanted him to somehow beat Bobby Fish and like win the match against Danielson, like win his place in the match. But that would be so good.
They'll cross paths eventually. They have to.
Oh yeah,
they simply have to.
Yeah, 100%. Let's see. We had a title change in Noah, finally. Marufuji no longer has the GHC heavyweight belt. Instead,
I mean, he didn't really have it that long. It's just that he only got 2 defenses before the end one.
Yeah, that's true. But the rightful champion is here. Katsuhiko Nakajima, finally, where he belongs, at the top.
God, it's so good. It's so good to have heel Nakajima as champion because there's only like 2 heels in the company. Like we couldn't have a face champ for any longer. We needed the young demonic kick machine that is 33-year-old Katsuhiko Nakajima.
33-year-old veteran.
Yeah. 33-year-old who started wrestling at 14. Like he's nearly 20 years in the business at 33 years old.
And he's fucking incredible. He's so fucking good. And like obviously if you have Nakajima and fucking Marufuji also like living legend status.
Still a genius.
Still a fucking genius. Yeah, still one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. No question.
Yeah, he doesn't work the same way he used to because of course he doesn't, but he still works at least as well. You know what I mean?
Like 100%.
He leans more into the technical style of things, but he's so good at that. He's so good at it.
He's good at everything. I've never seen something he's not good at.
Not putting his throat across a railing in a moonsault.
All right, well, yeah. I'm just happy he still has a throat after that. But yeah, that was a fantastic match. Katsuhiko Nakajima wins, is the champion of Noah, finally, again. Do we think Go is the person to take it off him?
No.
No?
I think Go comes back and challenges for it and loses.
Ooh,
I think he goes past
I'm down
Go.
with that. I'm down with that.
I think from the way that like the GHC title has changed hands over the past year or two that we've been watching, it's like it doesn't necessarily actually change hands during those narrative beats that you would expect it to. It's like those narrative beats of like closure, like closure of a personal storyline doesn't usually mean the end of the title reign. It just it like, when Nakajima last won the N1 and had the title match against Go, like from a storytelling perspective, it felt like it was time for Nakajima to take the belt off Go, and that would have been the perfect way for Go to have been dethroned. But instead, Go got to overcome him and lost in different circumstances later on. And I think in the same way, Go's return, as like triumphant as it would be, I think it would work to cement like Nakajima's place as like the big bad on top of the company, as like, oh, even Go coming back fully healed can't do shit to me. Like, you know what I mean? And then like he'd probably lose it to some other face a while later.
Maybe Stinger Kaito is the one to finally do it.
Kaito would be a great pick. Yeah, but I mean,
Kaito
I want to see. I don't think so. I'm still catching up.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But like he did seem real chummy with Stinger.
Yeah, well, him and Ogawa have like had to have teamed up because Ogawa had to like defend him against Muto because Muto was going too far, and then Nosawa, like they both ended up having beef against Nosawa. So it's like I think it's more of a like the enemy of my enemy situation, as well as the fact that well, enemy of my enemy, and you trained me, so like you're one of my trainers, so we will always have that relationship.
That's true. I was also about to say, is there anyone who isn't Stinger's enemy?
No, but like
no one like Stinger doesn't.
Nosawa is like really Kaito's enemy right now. Like remember, he's the one who.
Oh right, sorry, I said that wrong. I was meaning, is there anyone who isn't Nosawa's enemy, or is there anyone who doesn't hate Nosawa?
Segura? No, he does.
Yeah, no one likes Nosawa.
I mean, why would you? He's a little rat.
He's a little clown-faced rat. Don't shake hands with the Juggalo. We've been over this.
We can't make references to our other show on the first episode of this show. No one will get it.
Go listen to 2x2 if you want more Pro Wrestling Noah commentary.
No, I'm cutting that out. This is going in. This is not paid by the hour, actually.
But yeah, I think that's, unless you have something else, I think that's basically what we've been. Something that we can't speak a lot to really, but is still exciting, is that fucking Zeus has left AJPW and is now the president of Osaka Pro.
Yeah, what the fuck?
What the fuck happened there?
Yeah, so Osaka Pro, for those who don't know, is like a indie promotion, like a regional indie in Japan. I think was on the out, like due to COVID, I'm guessing. And it's known of like being like the home promotion for like a lot of people who went on to bigger things, so to speak. Like a lot of the juniors in Noah at the moment came up through Osaka Pro. Last thing I was ever expecting to hear was that Zeus from All Japan Pro Wrestling was leaving to take over and is now apparently the 100% sole shareholder. What the fuck?
And we'll be restarting the promotion. Like, and Zeus is like, he felt like he had a very safe spot in All Japan.
Yeah, like I'd heard a lot of like praise for him. And,
100%. That's a fucking like, I'm like, very excited to see what ends up happening with that. That's a wild fucking development.
It very much feels like a man with a vision has decided to do something, and apparently left on good terms with like the All Japan office, like,
which is really exciting. That's just good. That's just good to hear.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, I did want to give one honorable mention to Ethan Allen and Chris Ridgeway had a rematch at Catch in Manchester recently.
Hell yeah.
And it's up on YouTube for free.
We'll put a link to that in the description below.
Yeah, they were one of my favorite 2020 matches. They had a hybrid rules match at Blank Canvas Wrestling in Liverpool. It was the
absolutely incredible match.
Such a good match. It was the last live show I got to go to before lockdown started. And it really stuck with me all year as like, that even though a lot of things happened in wrestling that year and a lot of big matches and a lot of great things, like that one really stuck with me as like every time I had to think of match of the year, that was what I thought of, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they recently got to do it. They got to run it back at Catch. Not standard pro wrestling rules this time, but fucking banger. Absolutely, so good.
Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. I can't wait to watch it. I have not had the time to dive into it yet, but I'm so excited to.
Also, I've not seen the rest of that Catch show because besides this was the main event and is on YouTube, but the rest of the show is on a like UK streaming service called like Powered 4 TV. I don't know if that's powered4tv.com or something else, but like they've got a few British indies on there. I think like they've got quite a few local wrestling stuff. So I'm gonna get an account at some point, and we can watch the full show. But yeah, Ridgeway and Alan are both in Northwest Strong, and I think on that show, Northwest Strong like significantly expanded membership.
Oh,
so they've now got like 6 or 7 members, not just 3.
That's pretty good.
Yeah,
sweet. All right, Ridgeway and Alan, a draw confirmed.
I mean, it wasn't a draw. You're going to confuse people.
No? Oh, fuck. I mean a draw as in getting people in.
Yeah, I know.
Putting butts in seats. That's what I mean. Fucking hell. All right. With that, let's get into our interview with labor organizer Nino. A fantastic conversation with a fantastic human being. Yeah, thank you so much for listening.
We're here today with our guest, who I'll leave to introduce themselves, just so I know how much of your name you want on it.
Yeah, I'm Nino. Y'all don't get to know my last name. Not like you, not just you personally. But like,
no, but like the people, the listeners.
It's just like, people. My pronouns are they and them.
Lovely.
Fantastic. And Nino, you're here to join us talking about unionization and organizing in professional wrestling. I heard you have like a particular take on which word to use there, unionization, collective organizing, that kind of stuff, and some really good arguments for why one is more appropriate than the other that I'd love to get into you with. But first, we'd love to talk to you about like how'd you get into wrestling? Like, what is your background when it comes to wrestling specifically?
So I just started talking with Doc Diamondfire, and we had like this conversation the other night because I just can't sleep anymore, and so we got to talking about this. So I actually have like a pretty decent recollection for once. So when you're a kid, you don't pick your best friends.
Yep.
So I had like a best friend who I didn't pick, and I was over one night and they were watching WWF. And that seemed pretty cool because when you're a kid, most things seem pretty cool when they're on TV. And I didn't really know what was going on. I don't remember much. And then I went home and I was like, I want to watch this. And my father got very upset.
Really? Okay.
And all I really remember is like right to censor was a thing at that time.
Okay.
And I knew like as a kid, I was like, oh, you're not supposed to like these people. And, my father got real mad and he was like, you're not watching this. And he was right. And then, after like an hour of him like talking cause he like called my best friend who I didn't pick's, mother to be like, why are you allowing my kid to watch this at your house? And, by the end of that conversation, he was like, it's fine. You can watch it. I don't care.
All right. She did a good job of talking him around then.
So
I really want to know what that mother told him now. I want to hear her perspective on that talk.
She like, hey, I don't think she did anything wrong, but I do think I should not have been watching WWF in the Attitude Era as a child.
Yeah.
I don't remember everything vividly, but every once in a while, like a podcast or some other wrestling content, folks will go back. Like Deadlock will be like, all right, we're going to watch this WWF thing from 1998. And you're like, great. And they'll say something and like, none of it makes sense. It's all bonkers shit.
Mm-hmm.
Can I cuss on here? I'm sorry.
Yes, 100%.
I don't know if I've already done that before, but anyway. So like, they'll mention something happened and I'll be like, wow, I actually remember that. And I was like 9. So that was not appropriate for me. But I watched it for a while. I remember like in the Hardys a lot. I did a lot of jumping off of things to try to emulate top rope maneuvers, which is interesting that I didn't get more injured.
I was just about to say another reason you should not have been watching WWF at the time.
Yeah, you like have that one dumbass friend who jumps off of everything.
Of course.
You go out and they're like, I'm going to climb the trailer and jump onto that sofa that we pulled out of the woods. Mm-hmm. And you're like, that seems like a great idea because you were 9 years old.
Yeah.
And, other 9-year-old ideas, which is like, I'm going to spray lighter fluid on this log and then throw matches at it.
It's a fire?
It explodes. Yeah. It wasn't great. So it didn't turn out good. But that was kind of my thing. And then I think we moved and I think I just kind of stopped following. I stopped caring. And then, maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, I got to know a writer and she was, I think, live streaming or live tweeting SummerSlam.
Okay.
And I said, screw it, I'll check it out. Because there was like a free trial with WWE Network. And the first thing I saw was Ruby Riott. I couldn't remember her WWE name. Ruby Riott, the hype package for Ruby Riott and Charlotte Flair.
Sure.
And I was like, oh, this is rad as hell.
Yeah.
And so got into that. And then I went with an ex to see a local, what I didn't know at the time was a shindy in Southern Virginia. And kind of was like, okay, actually wrestling's pretty cool. Like, I'm actually really into it. And then fast forward to 2019, I move out to Milwaukee and, I kind of am getting outside of the TV network only wrestling bubble.
Yeah.
And my boyfriend and I learn about Effie. And then we see that Effie is going to be wrestling at Freelance in Chicago. And like, well, hey, that's an hour and a half away, and I will drive an hour and a half to see a gay wrestler.
Yep.
And kind of gone from there. And so we saw 2 Freelance shows, and then the pandemic shut everything down. We were actually going to have like a brunch event that I was planning, like a watch party for Effie's Big Gay Brunch the first time at our queer dive bar here in the city. But obviously that didn't work out.
I think Effie's Queer Brunch was arguably like one of the wrestling shows which benefited from the pandemic, from like getting to give the booking a second go before they actually put the show on.
Yeah, I don't remember the original card, but I'm sure if I did,
there were some changes that needed to be made.
Yeah. So yeah, then the pandemic hit. I think I kind of got to know a couple of other wrestle queers on Twitter. And then from there, just kind of like, I don't really have straight wrestling fan friends. I just don't I have 2. But like, if you have no marginalization, like, we're probably not going to be pals about wrestling.
Yeah.
But, so Speaking Out happened, and I had done survivor support workshops before, and have like a decent kind of zine library and digitized library of resources on transformative justice and survivor support. And so I kind of got tapped to provide some of those resources, to like a little informal collective. And that kind of got my name out there, I guess, with some people. And then nothing happened for a while. It was just kind of like all of us hoping that the pandemic wouldn't be as bad as it is. And then in November, MV Young, maybe it wasn't November, sometime in the fall last year, MV Young tweeted out, does anybody know anything or anyone who could help with union organizing? And I volunteered and got tagged by a couple of people and vouched for, because wrestling, apparently, much like the radical scene, is you do need several vouches to get people to talk to you.
Oh, yes.
And then it's kind of gone from there. And so I'm still very much a fan. I do remind everybody that I don't watch wrestling.
Okay. I think you don't need to watch wrestling to be a fan. There's so much wrestling going on. You don't need to watch it.
No, God, no.
Like people. I mean, like I say it a lot of the time. to like absolve myself of responsibility because there's so much, right? And I don't watch AEW or WWE, and they're putting out like 15 hours of content a week. And when I finish work, I want to sit down with my partner and eat dinner and watch true crime because it's formulaic and it's complicated. It doesn't demand me to do anything. And so if I do watch wrestling, it's definitely something I want. And it's something that I am like, all right, I'm not going to like get thrown off by some terrible plot point or promo or something like that.
That was me in the Mentalist for the longest time. I would just not watch anything else. There was genuinely, even while I was the deepest in my wrestling, like, oh god, I need to watch everything, I would still put aside like the time just after work to just sit down, watch an episode of The Mentalist because I knew exactly what would happen.
Simon
no
Baker's strange smile will get you through a lot of hard nights. Okay,
dude, Mentalist is a fucking good show, and I will die on that hill. It's an incredible show. But Simon Baker's hot as fuck in that show.
Let's get back to the interview.
Anyway, listen.
We can, that's a later conversation. And,
you're on a queer wrestling podcast. You know what you're getting into.
Right. I do endorse just get high and watch Cutthroat Kitchen at 11:30 at night. Until finally you try to go to sleep. But yeah, so I kind of since last fall, I spoke with MV. And despite being like a pack-a-day smoker for several years at that point, somehow managed to light my hair on fire while on the phone with him, which is like really
excuse me?
Yeah. I don't really understand how it happened. And I don't smoke anymore, so I smoke weed, but like I don't smoke cigarettes anymore. And so I was like, I don't really know how I would recreate this, like not deliberately. But
Hey,
so
can I give a suggestion? Don't recreate that. Don't.
It was kind of cool if it wasn't, dangerous and a little startling. Hair crackles a little bit more than I thought it would.
It sure does.
But yeah. But yeah.
There are easier ways to get rid of your hair. Like way easier ways.
The DHT is really trying. It's my least favorite hormone. I don't have anything against testosterone, but DHT is really just kicking my ass.
Jesus Christ.
But yeah, so I spoke with MB and we spoke, and then it's kind of gone from there to kind of slowly build contacts and get to know folks. I still do a lot of trying to touch base with people, make new contacts, and also feeling like, wow, I'm really overstretching myself. I should slow down. I
mean, it's natural. It's, both natural to think that, and also like you should probably listen to that sometimes.
Yeah. Right. Like I've done enough organizing to know that I am approaching burnout and need to adjust, but there's a lot of things that people carry over into organizing, especially even if they're anti-capitalists, that are capitalist mindsets, and that kind of burnout grind, make yourself a martyr for the revolution bullshit really is entrenched. And so it's been it's been a thing here.
So I actually wanted to talk to you about, like, because you have a really extensive background in organizing and like radicalizing and working and training people and instructing people on how to do this work. How did you get into actually, like, I get how from an ideological standpoint you become interested in it and all that stuff. It just comes from having basic human empathy, you'd think. But like, how did you go from just being at that point to like actually doing the work and becoming someone who has so much experience in doing that sort of work?
So I guess I'd hesitate to call it extensive, but I also don't know how to grade or like rank anything like that.
Yeah, that's fair.
So like the easiest way to say that I started with was I think I was like 22, and I met this girl at a party who was in the Socialist Labor Party, and she asked me, how did you get radicalized? And I was like, well, I stumbled on like Pete Seeger on Pandora back when people used that to listen to music, which got me into Utah Phillips. And if you ever listen to Utah Phillips, he does like a song and then he speaks for like 15 minutes. And it's just like, he's being entertaining, but it is also just like a historical info dump about people that he used to hang out with that you can't find in a book.
Yeah.
So that kind of like got me thinking about certain things. And then I wound up working night shift at a kitchen in the hospital, in the city I worked. And it was awful. It was soul crushing. And I, not really knowing what I was doing, agitated a lot at that job. Like I did all the things that I tell people not to do. Like talking about unionizing and organizing while at work, within earshot of your manager, and stuff like that. And I actually almost led a work shutdown, like a stoppage, one morning with the first shift people who came in. But the managers kind of started calling people into their office one by one, and I kind of shook that up. So I did like the Jesse Ventura shit. We'll get into it. But like I did the thing where you get up in front of everybody and then you say, "Hey, we should form a union. You can talk to me." And then bad things or nothing happens. So that was like my kind of entry point. And then I did reporting. I was like a freelance reporter for like 6 months.
Okay.
And I wanted to do investigative journalism, but they were also like, why don't you just cover city hall meetings? Which I had like a great tagline because they were like, this writer is politically inexperienced, and they're paradropping into I had a really good editor. He really liked me. It was pretty much just like, this person doesn't know what's going on. And I was like, I don't. And so we're talking about the budget for the city for the year. And if you ever go to your municipal budget meeting for the year, don't. It's 6 hours long and it's terrible. But the city was discussing merit pay, switching to merit pay instead of just regular salary increases. And this old fella gets up there. And he kind of goes on about, this is anti-workers' rights and who gets to decide what merit is, and it's not really good for anyone. And he makes a lot of really good points, and he like leaves. But I see his shirt has some letters on it, and and I'm like, cool, I'm gonna try to track them down. So I try to track down this group for like 3 months until I get a real job at the county. And they're all, one day I go in from my lunch break and they're like, "Oh, we're reading your coverage of the city hall meeting." I'm like, "That's cool." And the guy who is like my new coworker who has the office across the hall from me, he's like, "Oh, you mentioned Coalition Against Racism. Well, I'm the treasurer." And I'm like, "Shit."
Oh, shit.
Down for like for like forever. And so I started to kind of get to know those folks. And those they're still around, but they've been active down there for about 30 years in North Carolina. And so the guy who spoke at the city hall meeting, when I saw him, he was in the student nonviolent coordinating committees. He ran with the Young Lords in like New York City back in like the 70s.
He's been around.
He's I would say he's one of the guys who kind of turned into my mentor. And around that time, I did make contact through another friend who was an actual journalist, with the IWW, because we were just kind of like, what if they exist and they're worth a damn. And this was around, I think this was the election, right around the election that Trump won. And so everybody was kind of getting into overdrive. And so I got involved with the General Defense Committee in Raleigh, Durham. And stop me if I'm going too fast and just dropping a lot of shit. But
no, go ahead.
But so I attended they had a speaking tour, called the Community Self-Defense Tour. And they would do kind of like a talk panel. And then if your local, like your local union branch or whatever had the capacity to do it and the attendance, they would do they call it a picket training. The name for it has changed a couple of times. I generally kind of call it a direct action and marshalling training.
Okay.
So we did that, and I was kind of like, oh, this is actual like stuff, how to do things instead of, you know, passing down ancient knowledge, bits and bits. Because like I would take a class on this. And so I helped start a couple of IWW locals in the Southeast. And then as I kind of did more and met more people, you know, I I learned how to organize in a more intentional way, I'll say.
Okay.
And eventually kind of I have a lot of issues with the IWW, and we won't get into all of those. But,
of course, sure.
But they have a training committee, and they're ostensibly supposed to maintain like the coursework and the curriculum and everything for that workshop. And you have to get certified, you know, to facilitate it or become a trainer, as they say.
Yeah.
And I did that for a year and a half. Along with some other workshops like the direct action one, the survivor support one, some other ones that I picked up from a couple of conventions and connections that I made with other organizers who had been working on stuff. So, I left in like 2019.
Like right before the pandemic, right? Or like,
like 2020 was, I think, when I told them they weren't getting another red cent out of me. And so I still have all that stuff. I've adapted a lot of it and rewritten stuff, and my physical copy of like the pamphlets and everything is just full with notes and everything like that. So I don't claim to do the IWW's OT 101, Organizer Training 101. I actually, you know, feel like I've kind of distilled down a lot of the stuff. I think a lot of other people have. The things that you could get at a labor notes conference in the United States, or a union organizer training with like Unite Here or the AFL-CIO or any other union, they all draw water from the same well that the IWW does. So like there's a lot of just same stuff phrased different ways.
Like I said earlier, I would love to hear you talk about the difference between using the term for the independent wrestling scene specifically, which is what you're sort of involved in and pushing for right now, like the difference between unionizing and collective organizing and why that difference matters. I would love to hear you talk a bit on that.
So I don't like calling it unionizing because it's a very narrow definition. And if we were doing like an OT 101 and I had a big old whiteboard, then I would be like, what are some words or things that you associate with the word union? And you would throw out a bunch of things, and they would probably be
corruption.
The same things that everyone says. And maybe I'd add one of them, like mafia, like who knows?
Yeah.
But like it has a very kind of narrow definition, especially in, say, the United States. Like most, it's like it used to be that you could just kill anybody trying to organize a union. Like you just have a guy that you hired, you know, and he would show up with a rifle and he would just kill the union organizer.
Yeah.
And they would shrug their shoulders and go back and go keep doing what they were doing. And then at some point, you know, they said, well, you can't do that. And so
you got to be sneaky. And
then they kept doing it for a while. Still.
Right. They kept doing it for a while, and then they were like, okay, you really got to stop because people don't like it when you kill union organizers.
Didn't say Simon Says.
Didn't
say Simon Says. Stop killing union organizers.
So, you know, after like Blair Mountain, they were like, we really got to try a different way. And so in the United States, they created kind of an accepted, legal, state-backed, government-endorsed way to have a union, right? And I think that the National Labor Relations Act, it restrained unions. It made them institutions. And when I say that, I mean like now, well, the United Mine Workers went out on wildcat strikes in like the 80s, and so the government pretty much just facilitated them getting sued into the ground for breaching contract, right?
Yeah.
This is an illegal strike that violated the contract they negotiated.
Wildcats and solidarity actions effectively criminalized as a consequence of the new union legislation.
Right, because the Teamsters would show up to your city and say, anybody who drives transport is in the Teamsters now, and if the company said no, they would just say, okay, well, you're not getting anything.
Yeah.
You're not getting food deliveries, you're not getting medicine, you're not getting anything that you wanted trucked or transported in, you're not getting it. And they would just starve the city out until they won the strike. And so they're like, you can't keep doing that. That's too much. So you can't have secondary strikes, solidarity strikes anymore. So there's a lot of what I think are constraints that are put on unions as we think of them in the United States. Additionally, I think that once you create a very concrete institution, I don't mean just like you have headquarters, you become less flexible and you start to have a mindset that becomes a little more entrenched. And that means that if there are new tactics or strategies or complete overhauls to things, it's more difficult to take those on board. And I also think that a lot of folks, when they think of unions, they have a very specific and narrow idea of what the union gets involved in, right? So, we talk about like the bread and butter focus that a lot of unions have, which is pay and benefits. But like the union should also be actively engaged in making sure that the workplace is like not rife with sexual and racial harassment.
Yes.
Yeah.
You
Worker
can't
protection.
separate the social, environmental factors of like protecting employees from just the pure economic negotiation factors, because those all influence each other and feed into each other.
Right. And the thing that really got me on board with the GDC when I met them was that they straight up said this idea that you cease to be a worker once you walk off the company's property is preposterous. Because like, why? So like, if the union's all gung ho, and makes all these claims, so we're inclusive, we love queer people, which they won't say queer because they'll say LGBTQ. But they'll say we love our LGBTQ workers, we stand with them, and like, okay, but if there's some Nazis waiting on the street corner a couple blocks away from the shop and I get jumped on the way home and I go to the union and I say, hey, what are you going to do to help protect me? And they don't say, all right, we're going to figure it out. There's nothing to talk about with them anymore.
Yeah.
I don't think that using the term unionization is always the best, because I think it's limiting. And I think that organizing is a far more expansive, collaborative, and creative term to use, because it doesn't really imply anything other than like, we're all going to get together and do a thing.
The cooperation and solidarity.
Do stuff with your friends and get things is like...
I can imagine it's also like, because when it comes to independent wrestling, like, depending on where you are, who you are, and like who you're getting hired by, things can look so incredibly different that if you're working to unionize and establish one of those, like you said, a foundation or a institution in that way, I can imagine that it would become just untenable to like actually account for all the different circumstances that you'd need to account for, even across the US, not to even talk about across other countries.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine the US just legally it will be so complicated with like the federal law and also the state by state law and the way those interact and what gets interpreted what way, blah, blah, blah.
Right. And there's even, some cities and municipalities have their own sub rules. Like North Carolina is, I forget what they call it, but pretty much like the state of North Carolina, the cities don't have any authority. It's all whatever the state feels like letting them do. So like HB2, which a lot of people know as the bathroom bill, which is like the first one that everybody really heard about. You know, a lot of cities said that they weren't gonna comply, or that they passed their own legislation or policy or statutes to kind of counter it. And the General Assembly in the state of North Carolina said, "Well, it's too bad. You don't have any right to say that
you're under us, we're over you, we're right, you're wrong."
Yeah.
Right. Which is like a wild situation because you're sitting there and when I worked at the county, like for the county itself, and one of the things that's wild when you work for a county or you're active at that kind of like community or municipal level is that they all hate the state. They hate the state. They sometimes hate the state more than they hate the federal government. It's like a weird, like, you're like, okay.
Because the state's more
like, this guy's got like
a day-to-day.
Right. You know, like this guy has like a Gadsden flag, like a don't tread on me flag, and he's like a sovereign citizen. And he's like, I do think it's messed up that the state says that the city can't do this and that. And I'm like, okay, but like you still want to kill me.
You can say that all you want. I ain't gonna feel safe around you.
Right. But I think, way back, some folks were like, I think one of my Dutch friends was like, oh, the United States is like Europe. Everybody kind of does their own thing, and they're like vaguely, generally bound together by the European Union. And I was like, that's fair. So like when I was learning about my first conversation with MB, and he was telling me about the New York State Sports Commission. Yeah. Which is like a huge pain in the ass. And I was hearing about all of the rules and permits and yada, yada, yada. And then this was before the collective, the collective they had in Indiana. Yeah. And I was like, well, why'd they pick Indiana? And then he goes, oh, they don't have a commission there. You can do whatever you want. It's like, oh, okay.
That would do it.
And like DC, I don't know if you've ever watched the original Butch versus Gore, or any of the old like primetime pro wrestling bits. Like you'll notice occasionally that they'll mention stuff like they'll say fuck, and they'll be like, oh, that's like our one before the commission shuts us down.
Yeah,
and I'm like pretty sure that that's like pretty true.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there are a lot of different things, and like I kind of got into it with some rando yesterday. I guess it was yesterday, who said that he won't book someone again if they talk about their pay.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about this. I did see this happen. And
that's such a fucking classic move too. Like, oh no, it's so gauche to talk about your pay with the rest of your workers.
This guy was specifically a booker as well. And sorry, Nino, I don't want to tread on your story, Nino, but I do know because I saw it that the guy was like, oh, talking about pay hurts workers, like as if what he wasn't admitting to that he's the one who will hurt workers if they talk about their pay.
Right. And so I said to him, I was like, wow, that's you. Like I screenshotted the section of the National Labor Relations Act and the federal statute that says that you can't keep your workers from discussing pay. And, that counts as retaliation if you take action about it. And, he was like, oh, then sue me then. And I was like, man, you tell me not to. I'm spiteful. I'll do it right now. It's like, I'll start looking up lawyers. And, like the thing is, like, he's not a wrestling company.
He's a guy.
He's right. Because the thing that I learned very quick is that any dumbass with money can run a wrestling show. And that is not to say that there are not wrestling promotions or people who put on shows that are very intentional and empathetic and smart and whatnot. But like a lot of these guys would not make it through a business 101 course. A lot of these guys just want to do a thing, and they have a lot of disposable income, or they have some guy who says, I'll give you the money, just do whatever you want. Because I want.
And they're happy to take that financial hit because they just want to see the thing done.
Right. And there's happy, useful idiots out there who, they'll do the fantasy booking for some guy who's got way too much money. And they're happy to be there. And sure, But like this guy doesn't run a company, he doesn't run a promotion, he just does an event. And like he talked to us, look, it's a fundraiser. Great. Great. All sorts of shit is good and bad.
Hey, have you heard of this thing called
like, it's not right? And then later on, he's like, "Well, it's not a contract; it's an agreement." And I'm like, "Okay, man, like
that's the same thing."
I don't know if sorry,
one's written, right? One's written down. And
sure.
And the other one's in agreement. So, like when we talk about, I'm gonna throw it out there. GCW signs so and so. GCW didn't sign though. Britt Lauderdale is not sending a
everyone's on a match to match at most, if anything.
Right. And so like it's all over the place. And so when you talk about the different laws and statutes and regulations from state to state or against, like it's also that no one's regulating it in the first place. WWE or AEW have more regulation because they're televised, right?
Sure.
And like obviously it's kind of sort of a sports event. I think once you get to a certain number of crowd, and also once you have to get insurance, because like I bet you that those insurance policies and everything for all those events at WWE and AEW are pretty sizable. You have to do certain things to get those insurance policies in place so that you can run those shows. And like if you're just, I'm going to say Butch versus Gore, not to say that they don't have obstacles or metrics that they have to meet to run a show in Chicago. But like it's different than it is at the Palladium in Worcester, Massachusetts when WWE SmackDown rolls into town, right?
Of course.
And just in general, like applying the sort of thinking and methods that you could potentially use for the independent scene to the sort of things that would be available to you in a company such as AEW, WWE, like they'd have to be completely different. Like I can't imagine something that would work on the indie level, say the New York indie scene or something like that, would also work exactly the same inside of WWE, right? Like you'd have to do completely different methods, a completely different approach to things.
Yeah, you have to adjust to the circumstances that you have where you have them. I think like 'cause a lot of the things you were just saying, I think contrast very well with the state of things in the UK. Like I'm still an early trainee. I've never worked a show, so like I'm not in a union as a wrestler or anything like that yet because no one's paying for me for that. So I haven't felt the need as of yet. But I know that there was work for Equity, which is like just a creators workers union in general, to like started actively trying to recruit wrestlers. And part of the thing that Equity would teach them was like, hey, no, when a shitty promoter like says in your DM that you're getting this much money, that's not an agreement, that's a contract that is written, like that legally counts as a contract. And whereas this could lead us into a good conversation about like, one of the notes that Envy has down here is like, oh, why don't you want to be part of SAG or insert other already established actor crew, athletes union, whatever here? Like, like how, like, what is the,
That's one of those questions I see pop up constantly when unionization in wrestling is brought up. Like, oh, they should be part of SAG. They should be part of, insert union here,
But like we heard you say in the Twitter spaces you ran, recently, it seems a lot of unions, at least in the States, probably aren't willing to pick anything up until it's nearly done. So it's like, at that point, what are the benefits you're getting from that arrangement? Like, whereas somewhere like Equity may say, well, once you're a member, you can access our legal team so that when this dickhead says sue me, then you actually can sue him. And you don't really have to worry about it. What's like the cost benefit analysis look like, even just viability of like wrestlers being able to join some other guild or union versus having to carve something out for themselves?
So here's the wild thing. SAG, you ask any wrestler, SAG does not like wrestling. It looks down on wrestlers. Everyone looks down as wrestlers. They think it's lowbrow. They think it's not art. They think it's not this, that, the other thing. Obviously, sports at like athletics unions, I don't actually know what they are. I couldn't name it, but like to them, it's not a sport. It's an entertainment. It's an art form. And so they kind of keep them out. So it was really wild to me when Zelina Vega said, "I support unionization," and SAG-AFTRA's president was like, "We should talk." And I was like, "What are you going to talk about?" And I thought about it, and I was like, "Oh, you want that Twitch money?" Because like SAG dues, like every union does dues differently, right? I like the way that the IWW does it. Not to point anyone to the IWW, but it's all voluntary. You pay out of your pocket to them, and it's scaled based on honor code salary that you make. So like when I wasn't really making anything, I paid I think $7. It was sub minimum a month, which like isn't too bad. And I think like the maximum that they have for dues is like $33 a month, which is not it's not too bad. SAG, like you're paying in a lot of unions, you're paying a big upfront fee. First month's dues. It's almost, sometimes it sounds like you're about to rent an apartment. You have to have a security deposit and first month's rent, and all this other stuff. And that comes up to a lot of money for a lot of people. And that's not to like discourage someone from joining a union, because in my experience and in my analysis, it is always better to be in the union than not. It's just once you get in the union, I am very apt and quick, and a lot of other people are, to look around and say this could be better. And it becomes very much a case of trying to reform the thing from the inside, which I don't think you should do that. You should just build your own thing. But SAG doesn't want to. I thought ITSE, which is mostly like stagehands. ITSE does a lot of like most of the people who do tech and production work in WWE, I'm 90% sure are in that union. They're represented by that union. And also they're getting ready for a strike. So go and support those. I've heard. You can.
We've had some conversations about that in the Southpaw Discord. We've got union members who are also Southpaw members.
Right. And
everyone in Southpaw is cancelling the Netflix.
Hey, if that's what's asked for.
It hasn't been officially asked for yet. We're just doing it out of spite. Carry on, please.
But yeah, like I figured ITSE would be a good angle, but like most unions are not just casting a net to see who wants it, because it does take money. Right? If you send an organizer, I interviewed with IAMS I think like 2 months ago. And they were like, "Oh, we have, a machinists campaign out in Idaho, and we would fly you out there, and you'd be in a hotel for 3 months, and you'd go home once a month for the weekend, and you would just be there organizing, because we have entrenched assets, and we see, that this campaign could lead to an election, which could lead to a contract, which would mean that our union membership would increase out there." And like that's a big investment. It's a really big investment, because let's also not just like focus on like you got to pay someone's salary. You got to cover their hotel and their transportation and their food, not all the food apparently. And also you're paying for agitation materials. You're maybe paying for meeting spaces or workshops. Maybe you're paying to rent out space so that you can have events, or you're investing money in, I hesitate to call it like advertising, but like mail communications or phone banking to reach out to workers to try to get them to turn out for this contract. And you're doing signage and posters and all this other stuff. And like for like a traditional trade union campaign in the United States, like that costs money. And like, I get it, because you're also like, that's dues money. That's people's money that they paid you to organize and represent you. And if you're pissing it away, then people might get mad at you. Now, I think that's another big chunk of it. But like, I think I mentioned it in the spaces, is like vet techs in, I think, California got together through like a Reddit where they all realized, oddly enough, that their veterinary offices and the clinics they worked at were owned by Mars, like the candy company. And found that as like a point of relation, and then unionized. Like they organized a handful of clinics, and the first, like when you get to that point, right, and you like get your recognition, either voluntary or otherwise, and you get to a contract point, a lot of unions will say, okay, we'll take you on board, we'll represent you. And they picked the United Auto Workers, which is like, they're not in Detroit punching out Chryslers. Like, yeah, they're weighing your dog.
Okay.
So I think that's
a wild choice, but if it works, I guess.
Right. Like I know a lot of people who are in wild trade unions that don't necessarily match their profession, because at some point, every trade union that says, okay, you need to go look somewhere else because that's not our craft, it's not our trade, does have a moment that they say, well, I'll take your money, sure. So I think it's kind of strange. Like SAG and IC don't want to put money in, but also, you know, Billy Dixon has been vocal about saying there's not money in this.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the time, the money doesn't start coming until you get to like a network deal, right? Because WWE doesn't make money off of wrestling; it makes money off of network contracts.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, I've been saying since the start of the pandemic to Envy, I'm like, you know, a lot of things have been added to IWTV. Like, obviously, they're doing a lot of contracts. They've even got some British wrestling on there now. But like, I've been saying over and over again, like both to myself and anyone who'll listen, like, I don't get why some workers don't just get together with some camera equipment and, you know, like just have a co-op and try and put together like some no crowd shows, because like people are doing that anyway, and see if you can get a little deal off of it, and maybe that'll launch you forward, you know. Who know, which is like, you know, maybe a pie in the sky thing, but it seemed to me that like during the spaces, a lot of the concern, and maybe this is just a realistic part of like organizing in where you know that you're going to have to be negotiating, and like you said earlier, a lot of the people that are negotiating with are dickheads. Is like, you know, how do, or maybe dickheads is strong, but, you know, don't manage the business side of things well, is like, how do we make this more profitable for the promoter so that like the promoter will pay us more equally, sort of thing. I know that in the spaces you were a bit vocal about that, so I thought I'd maybe just give you a chance to, but do you want to talk about that now?
So I guess I kind of approach it from the perspective of WWE wants to make money. Vince McMahon wants to make money, and so he has to put on wrestling. Billy Dixon loves wrestling, and so he has to make money. And I think that's kind of like the go-to explainer here. And so I think it's a different point of operation, which is that, you know, Billy wants to make sure that everybody's going to get taken care of. MV wants to make sure that everybody's going to be taken care of. Low, you know, wants to make sure that anybody who works in the show is going to get taken care of. And that's not like an arguable point. They're not gonna go to a worker and say, I'm sorry, you just got to eat this one. Like, I don't think that those three would conscionably be able to like sit with that. And I think once you start looking at it from the perspective of what do we need to do to put on a wrestling show where everybody gets taken care of or has their needs met, that you get a lot more flexibility. Which, like, I have personal opinions about how some other promotions seem to run, which is that I want to run an event, and I'll pressure or manipulate or bring on whoever to make sure that happens.
Yeah.
So I think, especially when they got to talking about merch sales and stuff like that, they make more money off of a merch sale than a show. Yeah. Who am I to say that? Oh my goodness, I forgot his name. The fella who's officially sponsored by Natty Light.
The natural light heavyweight. I've also forgot his name. He's one of the two members of the Lost Boys whose names I don't know off the top of my head.
I have, because I lived in North Carolina for so long, and that was the thing for ECU students. I kind of just have like a knee-jerk no reaction to Natty Light. So that's like a chunk of it. But like,
is it Bradley the Natterday Saint?
Yes. Yeah, I love him. He's really great.
The gimmick rules
he's entertaining
so
as hell,
much.
but my brain is just like natural light. That's not
the natural light heavyweight Natterday Saint, the Natty Daddy Bradley Prescott the fourth. Bradley Prescott the fourth. Thank you very much.
The fourth looks like a kid that I would get into a fight with at Christie's Europa in Greenville, North Carolina.
100%.
Like,
he's someone who I'd like start talking to at the bar, and like I think we're like playfully jabbing at each other, but it turns out he's a lot drunker than I thought he was.
Right. I'd be like, man, you gotta shut the hell up, or I'm gonna throw you in the river. Like, and that would be that. But like, I hope he's getting paid real well by Natural Light. I don't know for sure.
I hope so.
See, the thing is, it's on the same logic we were just talking about it. I could see it being like, I don't know the situation at all. This is pure just me talking out my ass. But, it could be a case of like, oh, well, if I get this sponsorship, regardless of how much they pay me, that's a good gimmick. Don't want to turn that gimmick down.
Right.
This is extremely like. Also, I want to shout out that he has put his location, like where he's from, on Twitter as your local frat house. Want to shout that out. This is extremely like me always saying that. What the fuck are their names? Angelico and
Jack Evans.
Jack Evans
hybrid
should work on getting sponsored by Monster Energy.
They've got the look for it.
They do.
I don't know how old those two are, but I want to bully them because they seem to me like they are simultaneously in their 40s or their 20s.
I think Angelico's early 30s and Jack Evans late 30s, if I had to guess.
But, hey, I don't know. I don't watch wrestling, so I don't know.
Fair. You know what?
God, and bless you for that, honestly. We need more perspectives on this show from people who don't watch wrestling.
I always like to remind everybody I'm not being negative, I'm being right. And I don't watch wrestling.
Sure.
And it helps me have more right opinions. But yeah, I think, I'm sorry. I feel like I've gotten a little bit off on a tangent. Like how to,
okay.
So like the co-op idea that you had. Like I guarantee you that if I go and I ask Chris Kazama, hey, you ever heard anything like that? He'll be like, oh yeah, here's like 4 examples and give me a lot of really
of
good
it
history.
failing.
No, just well, I don't think that the intent was for it to become like a commercial success necessarily.
Yeah.
Or the people who put it on moved on to other projects or promotions or careers or what have you. Like I love hearing about the backyard scene. I love it. 'Cause there is some fucking anarchist international backyard confederation stuff going on, like years ago. That is
hell yeah.
That is so cool and ad hoc and thrown together, and DIY, and I loved every bit of it. But like, I don't know if their intent was, well, maybe we'll get a TV deal. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. And also, like, were the conditions right back then for something like this? Like, I get asked once in a while about, like, well, Means TV. What if we try to get a wrestling show on Means TV? And I'm like, well, Means TV seems like not my.
I feel like they'd pick one up if they felt it was the right fit, but
right. I I don't know what goes.
How many wrestling fans are going to watch that? Are going to get a Means TV subscription though to watch it, versus just people who already have that subscription who are wrestling fans?
Well, like first of all, who has a Means TV subscription?
I had one for a while.
Okay. Like I'm gonna look it up real quick just to be like how many? Can I find out how many subscriptions?
I'm
being quiet because I don't know what Means TV is. I have no idea what either of you are talking about.
Means TV is a streaming service that's a co-op, and you know the people who are behind it got big from making AOC's campaign videos.
Interesting.
But,
okay.
Yeah, but you know they have it set up so it's like if you can't afford the subscription, you can email them and they'll just sort you out and no questions asked.
So just at a glance, they have 2,200 subscribers.
Okay.
And so I don't know what their budgets are or anything like that. But my major thing is, you know, if somebody asks me, should I get on Means TV? You know, after looking at Means TV and watching a little bit of it, I'm like, well, if you did, like, I'd be worried. Cause they don't seem like people that I would ever want to associate with, but get the money. Get the audience, figure it out. I don't know. I think, but I think the co-op idea that you've kind of put out there is more in focus with what I figure would work, in that it's based around finding what works and making it work and building it in a way that functions for everyone. Instead of just trying to figure out how do I get on WWE? How do I get a TV deal? It is more focused on, we want to do wrestling. We want to do it in a way that everybody gets taken care of. We want to make,
and we know we might eat shit and not make a lot of money off of it, but we're doing it in a way that we've agreed upon amongst ourselves, as opposed to just one person's told us how it's going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that there's a lot to that. And, you know, my whole thing is, why are you going to try to recreate the AFL-CIO when you could just make your own thing that works for you?
Yeah.
Why bother trying to fit into that box?
And like, that doesn't even necessarily have to be a huge thing. Like, if you're a part of a local indie wrestling scene, like something you talked about in the Twitter spaces you did was just like or maybe it was a question asker who brought it up, I don't remember, but just like how to be able to make that work, you need equal amounts of information between the people hiring you and the people being hired. And like, just something as simple as establishing a hidden Facebook group or a group DM with like professional wrestlers in your area, sharing information about promoters. This guy is, you know, he's good for the money, but he might pay you late. This promotion is like bad with this sort of stuff. This promotion doesn't pay you on time, like all that kind of stuff, which is information that every single promotion has about every single wrestler, because the promoters are doing that shit, I guarantee you. But like, that feels to me like such a simple thing of just make a group DM, you know? So like, it doesn't necessarily have to be, I can imagine a lot of people when they imagine organizing, like, this is a huge thing that we're going to undertake, but like, it can be as simple as making a hidden Facebook group and just talking to each other. So like, what do you think, or is that wrong? Am I just completely talking out of my ass there? Or is there like, what if it is that easy, or if that is a part of it, why aren't people doing that?
So, so when we first started out, Envy was just like, we'll just have a meeting. Do you think that we should just have like a meeting? And I am always like, no, because one, there's too many damn meetings. I'm tired of meetings.
Yep.
I now have work meetings at my job, and I hate them, and I don't want to do meetings in my free time. That was, you know, that's a big thing of what I like during the uprisings here last year, when we were doing logistics work to support the protests, and like we got invited to like a meeting one morning, and it was just a massive waste of time. And I was like, I could be working. Like, it's like I could be putting stuff together. I could be working on communications, networking, and everything to figure out, you know, who my runners are going to be for the day and all this other stuff. I was like, this is pointless. Like, this is just like a waste of time. Thank you for the black coffee, but I'm going to go. And like, so I'm very much like, no more extra meetings, especially if the meeting could be an email. But the thing that I will always come back to is that organizing is so relational. And you don't know everything about everybody. So like when I started talking with some folks who flat out are like, yeah, we can talk, but like, it's gotta be off the record. Nobody can know that we're talking, because like, I don't want to lose money. Like, I don't want to lose bookings. I want to work I'm trying to get on TV, you know? And I'm like, sure, definitely. And so when
I'm not getting a contract if I'm known as the labor guy.
Right. Which is like, not to say that I'm like influential or well known enough that like I'm on a list that what's his name? Bruce Pritchard, who I don't know anything about.
Who?
I don't know who Bruce Pritchard is. He has me on a list where
the less you know, the better.
He Googles my name and the wrestler's name that he wants to sign, and if we are in a shared tweet, he's like, like. I don't think that it's like that, but like, I don't want Brett Lauderdale, who I talk shit on constantly, to not book somebody because they talk to me. And I don't want to throw 20 people into a Teams meeting that I've had conversations with, and they don't know who's going to be in there. And one of those people has an issue with somebody else and then tells a promoter, don't fucking book them here anymore. I'm done with it. Or something like that. And so like the group chat, throw everybody into a group chat to talk about organizing, is really a gamble. And I don't like, taking risks like that. Unless there's like a real good payoff. And so like having a big meeting without like a clear agenda and without really establishing where people are at in relation to something like this, the meetings can really break down. They can turn into impromptu speak outs where everybody's just kind of sharing grievances, which is fine. But like, it's not what you're there to do. Also, like, there's a lot of
catharsis more than organizing.
Right. There's a lot of group chats already where people all work the same promotion, or they're the same, they're the same carload, or whatever. It means like people are already organized, right? Like they're already self-organized. Everyone is, but like to just drop everybody without really kind of feeling out. Cause like, hey, the guy who was like, I won't book you again if you talk about your pay, has a fucking hammer and sickle emoji in his name. Right? And like,
I missed that. Oh my God. I missed that.
Right. And it's like, hey, I don't like Means TV because they all seem like the most insufferable white supremacist communists that like I can imagine, and I don't want anything to do with them. Like, I'm not into it. And so like the assumptions that we can make without spending the time to have those individual one-on-one conversations means that we can kind of wind up stepping on a landmine if we're not prepared for it. So there's a lot of things that folks are like, oh, well, they'll be sympathetic. I know. And I'm like, okay, are you sure? Because I had a guy I met a guy who was like, oh, I'm a socialist. And he was like a big online supporter of Rojava, which is great. But also he was a raging homophobe. And before I found that out and I finally met him, I asked, if he wanted to get involved with some local organizing. And he was like, no way.
Yeah.
He's like, I wouldn't want to lose my job. I was like, okay, man. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, you were talking about "Don't Tread on Me" flags earlier, and I in my head right now, I have a picture of like 3 wrestlers who were currently signed, who were at the time signed to WWE, waving a big, "Don't Tread on Me" flag and everything, and it's like, these are, you're not able to, it's realistically, you can't organize with everyone. You have to feel people out to know who's a right fit, who has the same goals in mind, who's at least willing to get on board with your principles.
Right. And like, I would love, like someone was like, oh, you should reach out to Effie. I was like, why? Because we're gay.
Mm.
And then, but like, like I would talk with Effie. I haven't talked with Effie, but like I would talk with him if that's what we wanted.
Yeah.
But like, I'm not going to go after him because he's gay and he thinks that the business should be better. Like, that's not enough to assume that he'll be on board, that I'm going to throw him in a group chat.
Effie's also a self-described capitalist.
Yeah. And like, I don't, hey, like, I don't think that that's necessarily a disqualifier to engage with.
No, definitely. Like we were talking about earlier, of like, you're going to have to be negotiating with promoters.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're also going to have to you're going to be working with capitalists. That's the nature of work.
It's right. Like I'm not happy that I have a boss, but like, that's kind of how it works. And I think, to like bring that back around, that thing, like, I don't see every promoter as, so the IWW preamble, fuck, hate talking about IWW, especially when they kind of get.
I could hear the fatigue in your voice, in your entire being, as soon as those letters came out of your mouth.
Anyway, like the preamble is like the working class and the employing class have nothing in common, which is like the foundation of their analysis, right? There's two classes: you're either a boss or you're a worker. Which, like, when they initially started that out, there was a lot of conversation over, like, well, what about people who are unemployed or aren't allowed to work or what have you? And like, they found solutions to that. And nowadays, the IWW is very something. But I don't look at every wrestling promoter as Vince McMahon or like your evil landlord or your the worst boss you ever had when you were 19. Or even
that's obvious from the way you were talking about Billy earlier. Like, Billy's a worker and a promoter, depending on what day of the week it is and where he's doing his job.
Right. And I'm like, there are definitely things that have to get done. There are tasks that factor into running anything, a business, an event, that it's coordination. It's communication, it's coordination, it's logistics, it's like the planning of things, right? And so when I think of a promoter, I'm really trying to break it down into what are the tasks that this role does. Because like, I don't have an issue with a coordinator. I especially don't have an issue with a coordinator if I'm like cool with them doing that job and think highly enough of them that like I would like them to have a little bit of temporary authority to tell me and the others like what needs to get done based on like them kind of seeing all the different parts together. But like, there's definitely plenty of shithead promoters who are bosses, right?
Yeah.
And so like, I think my take on a lot of it is that we need to break down this idea that the promoter is a boss, like your manager at Office Max, or like is a boss like a CEO.
No, most promoters don't have corporations behind them.
Right. Like, Dark Sheik over at Hood Slam is not Jeff Bezos.
Yeah.
He's just not.
Yeah.
And so like, I think a lot of the things that go into this, and this kind of goes back to the co-op idea, is taking apart an entire wrestling event, mapping it out, charting it out, seeing what needs to get done by who, when, and how, so that you can kind of be like, okay, this is what a tech does. This is what a wrestler does, what a ref does, ring crew. And these are the things that promoter does before, during, and after an event to kind of figure out like, okay, what do we need to rearrange? What's necessary? What's working? Where are the bottlenecks so that if there's a promotion that needs to be disrupted, that it can be, or like, what are the things that need to be thrown away? I think that's kind of like a major aspect of this. So like, if 20 wrestlers, like it's hard to think about how many wrestlers you need for a wrestling event. Because the number always seems way higher than I would think. But like, getting into it, like to start chopping it up and then say, okay, well, like I said, why is the promoter the only one who gets to decide how much everybody gets paid? And like Leroy, Big Game Leroy did like a really good thing about that in the space to talk about like, well, how do you decide how much a high flyer is worth, or a deathmatch guy, or a comedy wrestler, or the main event versus.
They all serve different purposes on the same card,
right? And like good promoters know the difference between a match, and they know how to do the pacing and all that stuff. You know, I saw one clip like 2 years ago where some guys were like, "Oh, we were told we were going on after these two guys," and they did a 15-minute match that was like an amazing technical wrestling masterpiece, and the crowd was exhausted by the end of it. And so we scrapped our match, and he's like, I won the match in 3 seconds with a surprise roll up, and then I celebrated for 7 minutes, and that's what got over with the crowd. That's like, that's the coolest shit ever.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
that rules. That's a pro wrestler doing their job. Like that's a pro wrestler knowing their craft really well, reading the audience really well, and responding to it.
Right. And I think that those are things that someone will say, well, you can't teach. Ugh, Enzo, I learned so much shit I don't want to know. You can't teach stuff like that, I don't think. But life is pain. But
yeah,
but yeah, you know, I don't think that's like a thing that you might necessarily be able to jot down, but like is a thing that people who are in a position to make those decisions to change something, like should be able to advise like, hey, you need to realize that this crowd is exhausted right now. And you've got some time to figure out what you want to do instead. Maybe you're welcome to do whatever, like the ring is yours, but you know, understand this is where it's at. You can go look for yourself.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And we're trusting someone who would not be able to get through a business 101 class to judge the value of that, and then hopefully, if they're better than average, actually pay the person that much.
Right. It's
just not a tenable
right.
situation.
And it's like well, that's just how it is. Well, why? Like why? Like
yeah. Just how do we stop that from being the case? Please?
Right. Exactly. I'm like, well, why is it like that though? Like, why does it have to be? Like, I just keep like.
It's the fucking. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry.
I do that with everything, and it seems very childish, but I am completely serious. Like I had someone who was like, well, we should destroy this organization, this socialist organization, if it's not doing that, and make a new one. And I was like, well, why make a new one? Why do we need one? Why do we need that? Why do I have to sit through another goddamn meeting? Like, it's like, why are you so dedicated to having a thing that is just like this? And that's kind of my thing with wrestling too. It's like, well, why does it have to be exactly like this? Why though?
Yeah. I mean, it's the Ursula K. Le Guin quote. Like any system shaped by human hands can be shaped by human hands and changed by human hands.
Oh, I thought you were going to go with the Divine Right of Kings one. She's got so many good quotes.
The line just before that is, "We live under capitalism. Its power seems inescapable. So did the Divine Right of Kings," which is like all time fucking amazing quote.
She's great. Yes. I hope to actually read her someday.
She's very good. She has a lot of good writing on
there.
But yeah.
But yeah, I think in the spirit of that anecdote you just told, I think maybe since we've been going a bit longer, maybe we should just try and hit some of the things we wanted to talk about quickly, and then we can skip to plugs if you've got anything you want to promote before we go. Okay. So I think the promoter who you had that conversation with, let's call it, on Twitter. The reason that happened was because, you know, not long after you held that spaces and you spoke quite passionately on the subject in the space, it became a bit of Twitter discourse about keeping your pay to yourself and not talking about it. So I thought I'd give you a chance to just, you know, go off on the podcast a little bit if you want to on that subject.
So for the last year at least, I've been pretty consistently, occasionally being like, everybody needs to talk about how much they make. Which is like, it's funny because I used to just say that generally, and now I say it like very specifically at wrestlers and people in that industry. Because like I do mean the industry. And I'm like, if you're a ref, you need to talk how much you're getting paid. If you're ring crew, you need to talk about how much you're getting paid. Like everybody needs to know how much they're getting paid, and that's the phrase for it is informational asymmetry. The promoter, the boss, whatever, has all the information and you don't, and therefore you can never make an informed decision about it. And my friend who got me into wrestling again with the SummerSlam live tweets, told me about the old kind of feminist women's only secret Facebook groups, mine just full of women writers. And now there's other projects. There's like a whole database of freelancers who share their rates, how much they made for how much work with what company. And like, I think that wrestling needs something similar to that. Now, whenever I do post that, go ahead.
Sorry, I was actually just going to say, I think wrestling may have kind of prepped itself for this a little bit, or at least in like the online space, with the speaking out movement, because that is something which did spark people having to keep like lists of names of like, who is this person? What have they been accused of? What have they done? Like just so that they can share them around amongst other people so that people know who not to work with. And like, I don't know how much that's a thing that's gone on behind the scenes in the industry, but like, that's definitely something I've seen going round and has been happening in wrestling since last year. At least, but not specifically about labor as far as I've seen.
Well, like I think it's not the same, but it's definitely related in that the whisper networks that communities and people create for their own protection are always going to be there. There is not one monolithic rates registry for wrestlers. Just like there is not one monolithic list of abusers or, what have you. And that means that, someone can go somewhere else where they have no info or no knowledge or no contacts and not know about the missing stair. And that missing stair might be that they wind up working with someone who abuses them, or it might be that they work with someone who doesn't pay them, or something like that. And I think that the whisper networks that were created and the connections that were made from speaking out have definitely helped create more safety than there was before. But I wouldn't say that it's the fix.
No.
Right. That's just how it is. Like, I've not spoken to people for like a year, and then they hit me with hey, this person says that they're from your city where you live now. Do you know anything about them? They kind of give me a weird vibe, and then I got to ask around, and it's like, oh, they got run out of this city and they're there now where they don't know anybody. So, smash their fucking brake lights until they leave. But I think, to get off the tangent, I think I think the rate sharing thing, it always gets some pushback. And I got one where it was like, if you do this, don't expect to keep any of your friends, because once they find out that you're making more than them, they're going to be pissed off. And I'm like, well, why would they be mad at you? You're not paying yourself. The promoter paid.
Yeah. That's the wildest shit to me. Like, this is something that happens a lot in you see it happening a lot in the history of organizing in general as well. Like, one group of people will get together and be super angry at this other group of people who are, working for cheaper or something like that, when like, they didn't set their own rates. Be angry at the people hiring them for that money. Be angry at the people who are willing to pay them that little. Like,
if someone's undercutting you, it's not because they want to. It's because that's the position they've been put in.
Yeah, it's such a wild mentality.
I think like
everyone would rather be making more money.
Right. And I'm always like, I will never tell you that the thing that you need is more money. I don't get to tell you what you need beyond like you deserve safety. You deserve to have your needs met, right? You deserve a roof over your head and food in your stomach, and to not work in a place that makes you sick, and like
clean water in your
right.
glass. And
but like, I don't show up to where you work and say you ought to be making more than that, and like expect that to like spur you to take on a risk. Like maybe
this was another thing that came up in the spaces, was like the idea of organizing, not necessarily just giving you extra bargaining power for contracts, but it's about adding pressure to ensure protections.
Right.
Yeah, so I actually wanted to ask you about that as well quickly. So I don't know if we should just do another segue before we're out of energy and time. But I was just wondering, like, with the current state of things and, like, you know, the work you've been doing so far, do you have any idea of how wrestlers do or may ensure those protections for each other?
So,
or with each other?
So I can list all the ways that I think that a union or a collective or what have you could improve conditions for people, right? And that won't necessarily result in anything. There's a really good I'm doing it again. There's a really good article written by the UKIWW's publication, The New Syndicalist, called "Nobody Cares That You're Right," where they kind of break down. They break down that you can create a logical explanation as to why someone should do something, but if they're not emotionally engaged, that it's not going to happen. And like I think, I think that it's up to workers, not just wrestlers, but like workers broadly, to look around and say, okay, we all got together. This sucks. What if it was different? You watch the Trotsky. Go look it up. It's a weird little high school drama about a kid who thinks he's a reincarnation of Leon Trotsky in Canada, and just go look up the Trotsky, because there's a great point where there's just like, this sucks. What if it didn't? Is kind of the thing. And once you start applying that framework to it, you just don't stop. Like, you just don't stop, because like I mentioned, I was like, hey, you go out there and you negotiate a better base salary at your job. That's great. Does it do you a whole lot of good if your rent gets hiked? And so then I'm like, great. So then you go and I can't incite violence against landlords on a podcast. Then you go and you create a tenants union.
But I can't.
We've incited a lot of violence against a lot of people on this podcast.
For a while, I was considered the most potentially dangerous person in the IWW. So,
hell yeah,
hey,
well done.
That's an accolade. Yeah,
it's a really nice thing to get told you are around a campfire with some beers. But yeah, like, you just go to the next thing. And so, like, yeah, maybe it's rent, but like the things that they could change besides like rates going up. Like I've kind of brought up a couple of times, is like, do you have time to like run the ring before you wrestle at an event?
Yeah.
And people are like, not all the time. And I was like, isn't that like a big deal? Because all the rings feel different, and you don't know if maybe a board's out of place, or you want them to tighten up the ropes for this match before you do it, because you need to do some maneuver that requires them to be tighter. Like, that seems really important to me. Or one of the things that I brought up, and this is, kind of based on my DIY organizing experiences, is like, why isn't there some local dad who will bring his grill to the wrestling event and feed you all? Like, why?
See, if they put out a call, there would definitely be people who would come and feed wrestlers. Are you kidding
so
me?
Many guys who were like, whatever, they got brought, by their wife or whatever to an organizing meeting in the community. And when we were like, hey, we're thinking of having an event, and it would be really cool if we could have some food for it. And they jumped up. Like, I'll come out there in my truck and I'll drop off the grill and I'll be out here cooking, and I can feed 50, 60 people. Don't even worry about it. Great, man. Like, why isn't
a lot of people are just looking for something to do. Like, if you give them a way to help, then that they can do, then they'll do it.
Right. And so I'm like, why aren't you getting a meal? Why don't you get a hot meal?
Yeah, exactly.
Or like, I understand that transportation and lodging and everything is difficult, but like maybe there's a collective solution, like a travel or lodging fund that can be created for people to, not just wrestlers, but like people and fans to chip into. And like that, obviously unveils a whole host of other questions that need to be answered.
Questions about crowdsourcing funds and
Right.
things like that, yeah.
But like, there's so many different avenues of improving things, and like, again, this is all down to like where you are. Like, different scenes do different things differently and all that kind of stuff. But like, if you're just looking at, we want to ensure that rates are proper, like that's very good, but it's also very far short of what you could be doing when you're talking about improving the situation for people.
I think I'm reminded. Sorry, not to be that bitch, but I'm reminded of a Malatesta quote.
When have you ever not been that bitch?
So, like, I like the one thing that Malatesta said was, "We must support all struggles for partial freedom because we are convinced that one learns through struggle, and that once one begins to enjoy a little freedom, one ends by wanting it all." And I think, I think that's like something where you can apply it to like partial freedom in terms of like, well, maybe it's not for all of us, but it is for this or whatever. But, in terms of more like of a solidarity like idea of like, no, it is for all of us. So what's partial is we might not get everything we want at once, but we can pick a thing we want to fight for and we can get that. And then once we've got that thing, why don't we just keep fighting? There's not going to be nothing else to find that we want to improve,
right?
And once you've gotten one thing, it's going to be easier to get the next thing, because you're building up experience, you're building up trust, you're building up like you're building something.
Yeah, and there's this this thing about people need to see the union, hear the union, know the union. It's been a really long time. But it's like the difference.
Fear the union.
Some people do need to fear the union. But like it's about that some people can just hear. There's always going to be people who are going to hear there's a union. Do you want to be involved? And they're on board. And some people need to see it do a thing. They need to see that it's a concrete, active, actual thing. Maybe they need to see that there's like a minor action on the job where they deliver a list of demands and do a momentary work stoppage until the boss, gives in. And then they're like, cool, you did a thing. You're real. You're tactile and you influence the world. I'm involved. And some people need to like actually like see it long term exist and win and influence everything in like a much deeper way. And they have to understand it before they're going to get involved. And like, that's how all organizing is. You're not going to get everyone on board with like one impassioned speech, no matter what, like the guys at Chapo Trap House think is going to happen when they say a slur. Like, it's just not, it doesn't work out like that. And so a lot of these things, these little steps, have a lot of implications. And like, we're not going to get everybody in the next 2 weeks. It's been almost a year that we've been doing this, and it's been quiet. Because most organizing is quiet and slow. Because that's how you make it as safe as possible. And like the major underpinning for this that I've had has been consent and safety. Because like I don't know how to engage. I don't know how to engage if those aren't at the forefront.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know if that really answered your question.
I think it did, and I think you also answered a lot of other questions while doing it, so I think that's fantastic. We have taken so much more of your time than we anticipated, but it's been fucking delightful.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Is there anything that you want to like shout out, anything you want to plug, anything you want to point people towards, stuff like that?
I don't have like a business or a service I do. Like if you're a wrestler or you work in the wrestling industry, and you want to talk about organizing, you can find me on Twitter. There's a thread. You can DM me. I used to have my Calendly link up, but that seems unsafe to just have out publicly. It's Mix MX Inevitable, INE. I don't actually know how to spell that off the top of my head.
Google it.
We'll put a link to
That'll
it in
be
the
good
show
enough.
notes.
You know, my DMs are open. So as long as you're not a shithead, you know, we'll make time. I don't have anything to like tell people to donate to except go find mutual aid request lists. You know, do give freely. Don't demand information and justification. Just give if you can, and always share if you can.
And if you can't give money, then ask if you can give time. Ask if you can give effort. Like,
Ask if you
there's
can
always
cook.
something needed.
Really investigate what reciprocity and compensation look like, because it is not just money.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Oh yeah, one last thing. You mentioned a zine library earlier. Is that a public-facing thing,
Mine
or is it more of a private archive?
Mine is like just a lot of stuff cobbled together. There are zine archives out there that I have not checked in a while.
Okay.
And I don't know if they still exist. But
Okay.
I will look into it if you would like.
Oh, it's honestly, it's fine. I was just wondering if it was like, you know, the sort of thing where it's like, oh, you have a zine library. Should we link that in the episode description? You know, that sort of thing.
No, it's literally just like 30 to 40 documents in a Google Drive folder from from like a year or two ago.
We can link a Google Drive if you want us to. It's no skin off our nose. Okay, sweet. Well, let me know.
Right.
Thank you so much for coming on today. This is a wonderful conversation. Envy, I'll let you take us out.
No, I think you just did it. Thank you so
Okay.
much for joining us. Thank you so much for listening. And yeah, this was fucking great. Thank you so much for coming on.